is, we even have bureaus here for international media or Western media. Are we churning out the right stories that give a positive image of Africa, or have we used their lens and their language to a point where whatever this description, as much as we might criticize it and say it is very negative and all that, maybe once you get the job, this is what they are looking for and this is what they want. If you do not deliver this, then you really would not qualify. So what responsibility do we have?
I think the Western media or the international media has become an agenda setter in Africa. And as I said before, is that after, I think, colonialism, a lot of things have continued happening. Now look, we are talking about the world economy, we're talking about terrorism. And the international media is actually almost all the time, or almost all the time, seizing the opportunity to set the agenda. And I think it is also high time we, as African journalists, and I agree with my colleague here, is that a lot of people, if you go to these newsrooms, these foreign newsrooms, you'll find a lot of people are Africans. Probably one or two people are the bureau chief who is just sitting somewhere in a corner. Look, BBC has done so well with many Africans in BBC. Look at Associated Press and many big names of Kenyans that we know who are working in Associated Press, Reuters, so many Africans. But then who sets the agenda? I think the international media set the agenda. We need to seize that opportunity and set the agenda for ourselves. Because even if you take a normal reportage in Kenya, in newspaper, it will be about Kieleweke Tangatanga. They'll talk politics from day one to day two. The international media is not interested in that. It's seizing the opportunity to be able to address the Chinese influence in our economy. Yet, as we are writing so much about politics, I think we need to be able also to be able to understand. We are talking about corruption, but in what context? In what context?
What solutions are we giving?
I think.
Alphonse, when it comes to even now facts and figures, because that's what Africa Check does, how accurate is foreign media when it comes to reporting about Africa? Because like you've brought out one particular aspect, the issue of how many women in the slums of Kibera exchanged their bodies for pads, which again was proved not to be true. So the question is, how many other stories have they blown out of proportion? And this now becomes what we repeat, because there's the other question of we picking this because it's from Western media and it becomes fact, and we keep repeating it until somehow it becomes truth to some.
Yes, the story that has been there for quite some time is Kibera is the largest slum in Africa with 1 million people stuck in that small area. So that story has been debunked, and even with the census figure as far back as 2010. But it's still, for some reason, the numbers in Kibera, they still insist on 1 million people. And there are stories about the way Africa is conceived. For international audiences, and this I have had experiences where I was going to talk to an international media house with global respectability. So you get into the media house and then they tell you, we are going to speak today about corruption when the president speaks about corruption in the State of the Nation address. So we just want you to give us the facts and figures around corruption. You get to the international media house, the president speaks, he doesn't speak about corruption. They say, oh, the interview is cancelled.
Wow.
So for them, they have
a mindset.
Yes, they have already a mindset, and they need to tell this story. This is the story we want to tell about Africa. It has to happen the way we want. If it doesn't happen, there is no story. And that's the frame that Sam was talking about. They have this conception that they have to talk about Africa. The question you ask about how they think about Africa, the kind of stories they think about Africa, is they condense different truths to a readily acceptable story that their audiences can quickly understand. So the complexity of having an election in Nigeria and having an election in South Africa within 3 months of each other, that becomes the story of elections in Africa continues. So it's like an election happening in Nigeria has the same thing to elections happening in South Africa. So for the international media, that is another story of another African election. And when you hear when you see the New York Times talking about the transition between authoritarian and democracy, and that is a kind of story that they want to cover.
That's the narrative
that's the kind of stuff. And then there is this, I just want to mention the New York Times effect, the CNN effect, where if CNN reports something, all the other media houses in the international space want to ride on it. If the New York Times reports something, all the other international, and you saw it with our own Eliud Kipchoge. When the New York Times wrote a headline that Eliud Kipchoge is the best marathoner ever, just before the London, was it before the London Marathon? Like, every media house, including us who have written about Eliud Kipchoge forever, were now like realized, oh, there is something here and we need to blow it out. So a lot of it, I would say, it comes to the cultural